In a world where strength determines one's worth, a young man finds himself abandoned by those he once called comrades. Deemed weak and unfit for battle, he is cast aside, left to fend for himself without skills, resources, or allies. Struggling to survive, he faces a harsh reality where every day feels like an uphill battle. Meanwhile, high in the mountains, a small village lives in constant terror, ravaged time and time again by a monstrous Fenrir-class beast. With no options left, the desperate villagers pool together every last coin they have to hire a renowned team of elite adventurers, warriors feared across the land for their unmatched prowess. The members of Flaming Dragon Fang are legends, each possessing their own deadly talents. But then there's Kurt, the only one among them with no combat ability, reduced to doing chores and staying out of the way. When the monstrous beast finally attacks, Kurt is the first unfortunate target, sent flying through the air like a discarded rag. As he struggles to recover, his team swiftly takes charge of the fight. Bandana attempts to restrain the creature with her wire, but the beast slams her into a wall with enough force to shatter bones. Thankfully, with their healer, Marleist, nearby, she's back in action almost instantly. Learning from her mistake, she secures herself to a tree, allowing Golnova to take his shot. With a burst of speed, he soars into the air and engulfs the beast's skull in flames, ending the battle in one decisive strike. Grateful beyond words, the villagers offer what little they can to celebrate the victory, throwing a humble feast in the adventurer's honor. But the mood quickly sours when one of the warriors complains about the food, turning to Kurt and ordering him to make something worth eating. Bandana chimes in, requesting that he put in extra effort. After all, it's the last time they'll be eating his cooking. Confused, Kurt looks to Golnova for an explanation, only to be met with a cold, blunt truth. He is being expelled from the team. Stunned, Kurt protests, asking if he has done something wrong. But Golnova's answer is simple: he isn't strong enough. While he may handle their meals and chores, he contributes nothing in battle. With the team limited to only 4 members, they need someone who can actually fight, a powerful mage or at least a capable warrior. And that means Kurt has to go. Desperation seeps into his voice as he pleads with them to reconsider, but Golnova has no patience for his begging. With a harsh kick to the stomach, he silences Kurt, making it clear that the decision is final. They have no use for him anymore, and there is no room for weakness in their ranks. The next day, Kurt sets off with nothing but the clothes on his back, his future as empty as his wallet. Aimless and uncertain, he wanders until he arrives in the city of Sama. With only a few coins left to his name, he knows he must find work soon or risk starvation. Eventually, he stumbles upon a small employment agency and steps inside. Behind the counter, a receptionist named Kersel barely glances at him before asking the inevitable question. "Are you here to hire someone, or are you looking for work?" Kurt mentions that he's on the lookout for a job, and the woman at the desk nods before informing him that he'll need to undergo an interview and an aptitude assessment first. She starts by asking the usual questions: his name, age, and place of origin. "My name is Kurt Rockings. I'm 15 years old, and I hail from a secluded village deep within the Sheen Mountains called Ust," he responds. Her brows lift slightly, unfamiliar with such an isolated settlement, but she swiftly moves on to his work history. Kurt explains that he was previously a part of the renowned group, Flaming Dragon Fang, though his responsibilities were mostly mundane chores. However, he was recently dismissed from his position. At the mention of his affiliation with an elite SS-ranked party, her expression shifts to mild surprise. Even if his role had been minor, having that name associated with his past could work in his favor. Encouraged by this unexpected turn, Kurt is eager to complete the aptitude test, knowing it will determine his strengths and weaknesses. In this world, aptitudes are believed to be divine blessings, ranging from G rank, the lowest, to the unparalleled SSS rank. The gap between these levels is vast. A G rank swordsman might struggle to even lift a blade, while an A rank warrior could split a boulder with ease. Anticipation surges through him as he awaits his results, but when they finally appear, his excitement crumbles. Every single combat-related aptitude is graded at G rank. The truth is undeniable: he has no future in battle. Disheartened, Kurt's hopes sink, but the woman reassures him that combat isn't the only path. He might still possess a valuable trade-related talent, such as alchemy or blacksmithing. Unfortunately, the specialist responsible for testing those skills is currently away on vacation, meaning he will have to wait a full week to find out if he has any viable talents. Frustrated, Kurt bluntly states that he can't afford to wait that long. He's one meal away from collapsing in the street, and if he doesn't secure a job today, he's out of options. The woman acknowledges his desperation and offers an alternative. She gestures toward a nearby pile of sandbags and asks him to try lifting one. As soon as Kurt grips the bag, he feels something unusual, a slight pull, as if the sand inside is siphoning a fraction of his energy. Despite this, he hoists the bag with little difficulty. Seeing this, she nods approvingly. If he can handle that, then he should be capable of basic construction work. She tells him about a frontier town in the Margraviate of Tihome that is in urgent need of laborers to rebuild their city walls. Writing him a letter of recommendation, she assures him that this should help him get a chance. Kurt expresses his gratitude and heads out at once to meet with the Margrave. Upon arrival, the Margrave gives him a scrutinizing look after reading the letter. To him, Kurt probably seems more like someone who would crumble under pressure than someone suited for manual labor. However, given the dire need for workers, the Margrave decides to take a chance on him. He instructs Kurt to mix cement and apply it to mend the walls, informing him that his pay will depend on the amount of work completed. Before leaving, he issues a final warning: if Kurt hasn't used at least half a barrel of cement by the time he returns, his payment will be next to nothing. Kurt considers asking a question. No one mentioned that mana is required to make the cement adhere properly, but he ultimately keeps his thoughts to himself. Maybe it's common sense, and he just sounds clueless, but something about this job seems off. The quota is barely half a barrel, way too easy, in his opinion. So, he decides to make the most of it before the guy returns. By the time the overseer comes back, his expression is one of pure shock. Not only has Kurt hit the target, but he's also blown past it, finishing an entire section of the wall. Kurt even apologizes, saying he could have done more if he hadn't run out of cement. The overseer just stares, struggling to process what he's seeing. He narrows his eyes at the top of the wall and asks how Kurt managed to repair that part, too. Grinning, Kurt casually explains that he tossed the cement up and spread it around with a stick. Normally, someone like the overseer would call that a blatant lie. Finishing so much in so little time should be impossible. But the proof is right there. The man swallows his skepticism and acknowledges the reality before him. He then asks how long Kurt plans to stay, and Kurt replies that he only needs the job for a week. Surprisingly, this puts the overseer in a good mood. He tells Kurt he's already done more than enough for the day and can leave early. However, there's a slight issue: he doesn't have enough money on hand to pay Kurt properly. Instead, he hands over a small pouch of coins, promising to send the rest through the agency later. Kurt's eyes widen. Even that small pouch holds more than he ever earned while slaving away for the so-called hero party. For the next few days, Kurt keeps showing up, working hard, repairing section after section of the wall. Then, out of nowhere, the overseer informs him that his services are no longer required. Confused, Kurt asks why. The man explains that the entire project was meant to provide jobs for those in need, but Kurt is just too damn efficient. If he keeps working, there won't be any jobs left for others. The overseer isn't upset; if anything, he's impressed. He even praises Kurt, saying his skills are at least double S rank, maybe even higher. Honestly, he believes Kurt would be better off in the royal capital, not wasting his talents here. As a parting gift, he hands Kurt a generous payout for ending the contract early before walking away without another word. But Kurt, being Kurt, completely misinterprets the situation. He assumes he got fired because he wasn't good enough, and that thought stings more than he'd like to admit. Feeling dejected all over again, he heads back to the temp agency to tell his mother the bad news. Unfortunately, the evaluation for his trade skills is still a few days away. Just then, a commotion erupts at the front desk. A girl is in a heated argument with the receptionist, trying to post a recruitment ad. The receptionist, clearly frustrated, tells her that no sane person would accept the kind of terrible conditions she's offering. But the girl refuses to back down, insisting that the agency should at least try to find someone. Her persistence starts drawing attention. Curious, Kurt walks over to see what's going on. His co-worker quickly explains the situation. The girl wants to hire a miner to dig through an unexplored mountain, but refuses to offer any upfront payment. She'll only pay if the excavation is successful. Kerschel doesn't bother to hide her skepticism. No sane person would accept such an offer. She advises the young woman to seek investors instead, arguing it would be a better solution to develop the mine. However, the girl dismisses the idea outright, explaining that if she doesn't pay off the overdue taxes by the end of the week, the mine will be seized. That's when Kurt speaks up, claiming he's just reckless enough to take on the job. He adds that he's no stranger to mining work, having helped excavate back in his village. Kerschel hesitates, questioning if he's truly prepared for this, especially since the contract offered means there's a strong possibility he won't get paid. Before Kurt can answer, the girl interjects. She admits she originally hoped to hire a robust dwarf, not a lanky boy who looks like he'd collapse from lifting a shovel. Still, hiring a dwarf requires at least 10 silver upfront of money she doesn't have. With no better option, she begrudgingly accepts Kurt's help. As they leave, Kerschel watches from her desk, uneasy about the whole situation. The job seems like a disaster waiting to happen, and she doubts Kurt understands what he's getting into. A small part of her even thinks he'd earn more working at a love hotel. She briefly daydreams about spending a night with him and muses that she'd happily pay for that experience. Before she can get too lost in thought, her co-worker interrupts. There's been a payment transfer. It's for Kurt's previous job, fortifying the Margrave's walls. Expecting something modest, perhaps 50 silver, she's stunned to see the amount, 200 gold. She stares at the check in disbelief and is so shocked she nearly stumbles over the sandbag stacked beside her chair. Her co-worker quickly cautions her to be careful, reminding her that those particular sandbags aren't ordinary. They measure mana reserves, growing heavier for those with substantial magic power. Most people barely react to them, so Kerschel lifts them with ease. But she suddenly recalls seeing Kurt struggle with them a few days prior, and it makes her wonder, is he really just a wandering worker? Meanwhile, Kurt and Ueshia trek through the forest toward her campsite. Upon arrival, Kurt tenses up, noticing only a single tent. Yuashia reassures him that it's spacious enough for them both, but Kurt hesitates, admitting he wouldn't be able to sleep next to a beautiful woman like her. At first, Yuashia assumes he's teasing, but when she glances at him, she realizes he's completely serious. Momentarily speechless, she silently hands him a boiled potato for dinner. It's a humble meal, just a simple potato, but the act of someone cooking for him after so long fills Kurt with gratitude. He's even more appreciative that Yuashia sits beside him as they eat. Back in his old party, Golova and the others never even allowed him to share the same dining space with them. That night, Kurt and Yuashia settle in for the night, but Kurt finds himself unable to sleep. Yuashia is lying beside him dressed only in her underwear, making it impossible for him to relax. Realizing he won't be able to rest, he grabs his things and quietly heads outside to sleep under the stars. As soon as he leaves, Yuashia, who had only been pretending to sleep, slowly opens her eyes. She had deliberately worn so little to see if Kurt would try anything while she slept. Now, she feels relieved, he's proven himself to be trustworthy. The next morning, Yuashia steps out of the tent and spots Kurt sleeping by a tree. A small pang of guilt hits her for forcing him to sleep outside, but then she notices something: her jacket has been mended. When Kurt wakes up, she immediately asks if he was the one who repaired it. He nods. She examines the stitches, surprised by how neatly they were done. She never expected him to have sewing skills, and it makes her wonder if mining is really the right path for him. But they've already committed, so there's no turning back now. Kurt then asks if she's chosen a spot to start digging, but Yuashia admits she was just going to pick a place at random and hope for the best. He tells her that method won't work and offers to show her a better approach. Leading her to a rocky section of the mountain, he carefully studies the terrain. Within minutes, he finds a stone embedded with gems. Yuashia watches in shock, she never expected him to find something so quickly. Yet, he doesn't stop. In less than 10 minutes, he's uncovered every gemstone in the area. As she stares at the precious stones, her mind races. If she sold all of them, she could clear her debt instantly. But before she can celebrate, Kurt stops her. At first, she assumes he's claiming the gems for himself, but that's not it. He explains that they'll be far more valuable if he refines them into magic crystals first. She comments that it's an impressive idea, but mentions that only 10 mags in the entire kingdom are capable of such a feat. However, before she can even finish her sentence, Kurt already holds a completed crystal in his hand. Yuashia is left speechless, struggling to comprehend how he not only created a magic crystal but did so instantly, something that would normally take even the most skilled mags at least an hour. Once Kurt has finished refining all the raw gems into brilliant crystals, he finally allows Yuashia to take them to market. She heads to the city while Kurt remains behind in the mountains, tending to unfinished tasks. At the city's customs office, she confidently announces her intent to sell magic crystals, but their incredible quality immediately raises suspicion. The agent questions their origin, and knowing he won't believe her if she claims a random person made them, she flashes her royal family emblem to silence him. It's a bit of a bluff. She hasn't been affiliated with the royal family in some time, and they never reclaimed the emblem, but it works, granting her access to the teleportation circle leading to the capital. Upon arrival, she visits an old friend, Mimiko, who owns a shop. Yuashia presents the magic crystals for sale, and at first, Mimiko doesn't notice anything unusual. But upon closer inspection, she realizes they contain 10 times the usual mana, valuing them at 10 gold apiece. Yuashia is stunned. Kurt gave her 50 of them. However, Mimiko remains unfazed and casually hands over 500 gold without hesitation. Before Yuashia can leave, Mimiko has 2 conditions. First, she insists that any future sales of these high-quality crystals be exclusive to her shop, as their sheer potency makes them too valuable to be widely distributed. Second, she wants to know the identity of the person who created them. Yuashia readily agrees to the first request but hesitates on revealing the source, stating she needs permission first. Mimiko, who also holds a position as a court maid for the royal family, isn't pleased. She tries to leverage her status to pressure Yuashia into revealing the information, but since Yuashia no longer serves the royal family, she isn't bound by any obligations. Realizing force won't work, Mimiko switches tactics and makes an offer. If the mage behind these crystals agrees to join the royal family's service, he will be granted the rank of count and full access to the royal research facility. With that, Yuashia leaves Mimiko's shop, gold in hand. The next morning, she returns to the mountain, only to stop in her tracks. In just one day, Kurt has somehow built an entire house. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for the next part. They sit down inside, and during their conversation, Yuashia brings up that one of her contacts wants to offer Kurt a prestigious role as a royal mage. If he accepts, he'd be treated like nobility, great pay, full benefits, the whole 9 yards. Kurt struggles to believe someone would seriously offer him something so grand, but Yuashia assures him it's a legitimate offer. When she asks him what he plans to do, Kurt shocks her by saying he's going to refuse. Yuashia is left speechless. Turning down a royal mage position is basically unheard of. But Kurt explains that he doesn't think he's earned that kind of status. Deep down, he still feels like he should crawl back to the Flaming Dragon Party and ask just to be their errand boy again. Meanwhile, over with the Flaming Dragon crew, things are falling apart fast. They're getting thrashed by a furious tree monster. Gulliver's fire magic isn't doing anything, and in frustration, he yells at Mortal Fist to heal him. She's been trying, but her healing spells are barely having an effect, and nobody knows why. In a desperate move, Gulliver tells their newest member to launch a fire spell, only to find out the guy can't even use fire magic. With Kurt gone, their teamwork is a mess, and Bandana's the only one who seems to realize just how deep in trouble they are. Back at the mountain, Kurt continues working with Yuashia in the gem mines, casually mentioning he found a rich mineral vein the day before, enough to keep them busy for a while. Yuashia admires his work ethic but worries he's overdoing it, especially after everything he pulled off the previous day. Kurt, being Kurt, brushes it off, saying he got a full 6 hours of sleep. That completely stuns Yuashia. She starts mentally calculating how he managed to build a house and still rest that much. Kurt misreads her silence, thinking she's mad at him for slacking, and immediately apologizes, promising to work harder. Yuashia knows she should probably sit him down and explain how ridiculously powerful he actually is, but she still can't figure out where to even begin. Instead of getting into it, they grab their gear and head to the mine to dig for more gems. Kurt leads her to the spot he found earlier. It looks like a regular patch of forest to Yuashia, but he insists there's a rich deposit underground. He gives her one odd warning, though: don't dig deeper than 500 meters, like that's even possible by accident with just a pickaxe. Before she can ask what he means, Kurt says he's heading to another site and that they'll regroup later. Left on her own, Yuashia gets to work, digging with everything she's got. She spends the entire day at it, and just as the sun starts to set, she finally uncovers a massive hunk of topaz. She's ecstatic, especially since she handed over all the profits from the last batch of magic gems to Kurt. Since she was the one who found them, this discovery felt like hers alone. She could easily ask Kurt to refine the gem into a magic stone and boost its value threefold, but something holds her back. She doesn't want to take advantage of him, he's already done so much. Still, her curiosity wins out, and she heads off to see what Kurt's been up to. She expected him to go overboard, he always does, but what she actually finds is way beyond anything she imagined. Kurt didn't just dig a hole, he built an entire underground tunnel system in just 8 short hours. Eventually, Kurt climbs out looking a bit disappointed. He explains that the dig was a bit of a failure. He only found a small amount of the material he was aiming for and the rest is, in his words, junk. She peeks into the cart, expecting rocks and rubble, but instead sees glittering metal that definitely doesn't look like garbage. When she asks what it is, Kurt casually shrugs and says it's just mithril ore. Back home, it was so common people treated it like weeds. Ishi is stunned, completely thrown off by the idea that someone would think mithril belongs in the trash. Curious, she asks what he was originally hunting for, and Kurt pulls out a tiny, glowing stone, a piece of orichalcum. He only managed to dig up enough to fill a small box, but even that is incredibly valuable. Orichalcum is literally called the metal of the gods. A single gram is worth a fortune, and Kurt just dug up a box of it like it's no big deal. At that point, Yuashia decides she's absolutely done with mining for the day and tells Kurt that the topaz she found will be enough to cover her taxes. With that, their little agreement ends, meaning Kurt is back to being unemployed, totally unaware that he's now richer than most nobles will ever dream of being. On his way to the job agency, Kurt runs into Bandana. He's genuinely happy to see her and asks why she's out here. That's when she tells him she's no longer with Flaming Dragon, and there's a whole messy story behind it. Turns out, after their last mission fell apart, Gulliver stormed off to find a 5-star restaurant in search of decent food. But no matter how fancy the place was, everything tasted awful compared to Kurt's cooking. In a rage, Gulliver trashed the entire restaurant and left without paying. Later, when he bumped into Bandana in a back alley, she tried to talk some sense into him. But Gulliver was too far gone, obsessed with finding food that matched Kurt's standards, and ordered her to track Kurt down and drag him back by force if necessary. Instead of obeying, Bandana swiped his teleport crystal and ran. As she escaped, she noticed city guards heading for Gulliver. With no teleportation crystal, he was definitely getting arrested for the destruction he caused. To top it all off, Marlice had been summoned by the church for unknown reasons. With everything falling apart, Flaming Dragon was officially done. Bandana doesn't share every ugly detail about Gulliver's meltdown, but she tells Kurt enough for him to understand. Kurt is clearly shaken to hear that the team broke up. He still clung to the hope that one day he might return to them, but with Dream gone, that hope felt emptier than ever. Bandana, however, couldn't understand why he even wanted that in the first place. Kurt ended up explaining he had truly looked up to Gulliver, had respected him deeply, and somehow hadn't fully realized just how awful he actually was. Losing the chance to work with him again genuinely stung. Bandana didn't really get it. For her, El Nova was nothing more than a front, just an excuse to stay close and keep an eye on Kurt. Since Kurt was already headed toward the guild office, Bandana figured he must be on the hunt for a new gig. Lucky for him, she had a lead ready. One of her contacts was running a workshop and needed extra hands. And not just any workshop, this woman was an Atelier master, a big deal considering there were only a few of them, respected almost like nobles. She asked if Kurt would be interested, and of course, he agreed without hesitation. Bandana handed him a map, pointed him in the right direction, and sent him off toward his next opportunity. After a little while, Kurt reached the spot Bandana marked. It was supposed to be an Atelier master's workshop, but honestly, it just looked like an ordinary house, nothing flashy or magical about it at all. He knocked at the front door, and to his surprise, it was opened by a tiny elf girl. For a split second, Kurt thought she might actually be the master, but she quickly corrected him. She introduced herself as Michelle, the assistant, and greeted him warmly. Kurt let her know he was there for the job, and Michelle looked genuinely thrilled, like he'd just solved all her problems. She led him into the kitchen, but as soon as he crossed the threshold, a horrific smell slammed into him, like rotten herbs mixed with something even worse. Michelle quickly apologized, explaining that the place had fallen apart since she'd been run ragged with errands. Before Kurt could say anything, a voice from deeper inside the house called out for Michelle. She rushed off, asking Kurt to help straighten up a little in the meantime. It wasn't exactly the magical experience he'd been hoping for, but cleaning was easy enough, so he rolled up his sleeves and got started. About 30 minutes later, the kitchen looked brand new. Still no sign of Michelle though, and with no clue what to do next, Kurt started wandering the halls a bit. He found a door slightly ajar and knocked gently. A girl's voice from inside told him to come in. When he pushed the door open, he immediately regretted it. A nearly naked girl stood casually by the bed like it was the most natural thing in the world. Kurt immediately freaked out, apologizing profusely and stumbling backward, but the girl just waved it off like it was nothing. He quickly stammered that he was just looking for Michelle. The girl calmly mentions that she's likely down in the basement. Kurt gets ready to take off again, but he suddenly stops. His eyes catch something strange, a dark, unnatural-looking mark on her stomach. His instincts kick in immediately. It's a curse. He asks if he can take a closer look, and she nods without hesitation. Kurt kneels beside her, gently placing his hand over the mark, trying to gauge how deep the curse runs. Normally, curses like this damage internal organs badly, and he assumes eating must hurt her. But to his surprise, her stomach seems mostly fine, especially after he hears it rumble. Realizing she's hungry, Kurt offers to head back to the now spotless kitchen to make her something to eat. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ueshiya sits down with Mimiko, discussing the Myethil and Orculum discovery that Kurt dropped on them. The issue isn't just that he found such rare materials, it's that he didn't even refine them into magic-grade crystals, and yet their value already exceeds 50,000 gold coins. The sheer number leaves Ueshiya stressed. She turns to Mimiko, asking what would happen if the world found out what Kurt could really do. Mimiko doesn't hold back. Best case, someone kidnaps him and uses him as a personal gold mine. Worst case, someone sees him as too big a threat and eliminates him. Then Mimiko flips the question on Ueshiya, asking what her own plans are for Kurt. Ueshiya says she's considering registering him as an Atelier master. It would grant him recognition and legal protection. She also plans to stay close as his bodyguard. The real problem, however, is Kurt himself. He's completely oblivious to how extraordinary he is and stubbornly believes he's just ordinary. If she doesn't move quickly, Kurt could land himself in serious trouble simply because he doesn't know his worth. Back at the workshop, Kurt finishes making a warm bowl of porridge for the mysterious girl he met. Just then, Michelle and the Atelier master, Atelier, come up from the basement. They freeze in their tracks. The once messy kitchen is now spotless and smells incredible. Atelier, stunned, points to the stove and asks about the food. Kurt casually explains that the girl upstairs mentioned being hungry, so he whipped something up for her? Ailier's expression changes the moment she realizes which girl he's referring to, and she quickly makes Kurt promise to keep quiet about her. Kurt agrees easily, not understanding the full weight of the situation. Atelier thanks him and hands over 3 silver coins, telling him he can call it a day. Kurt stares at the coins in disbelief, thinking the pay is way too much for just cleaning and cooking, but Atelier insists he earned it and asks him to return tomorrow. Shortly afterward, Atelier brings the bowl of porridge to the girl's room, reminding her gently that she needs to stay hidden. Still, because Kurt didn't seem like a threat, Atelier decides it's safe just this once. Lysia hasn't touched the food yet, so Atelier offers to test it for poison just to be safe. Lysia shakes her head. There's no need. Even though they only spoke for a short time, she trusts Kurt. She had a strong hunch that Kurt wasn't the kind of person to pull anything shady. Honestly, considering how far the curse had already spread, a little poison wouldn't make much of a difference at this point. Atelier had spent her whole life doubting the people around her, but for once, she wanted to trust someone. After a short pause, Atelier silently gives Lysia permission to eat. However, as soon as Lysia takes her first bite, she starts sweating profusely and collapses to the floor. Panic surges through Atelier, immediately convincing her that Kurt really had poisoned Lysia. She's already preparing herself to track him down, but before she can move, Lysia suddenly sits up like nothing ever happened, claiming she feels incredible and that the curse is completely gone. Atelier just stands there, completely stunned. That curse was no ordinary affliction. It was the kind that would take years of research and a team of master healers to even weaken, much less break entirely. Yet here it was, wiped away, all because of a single bowl of porridge. Meanwhile, far away, the secret organization responsible for cursing Lysia scrambles into an emergency meeting. Word just reached them that their carefully crafted curse has been completely shattered, ruining their plan to eliminate her quietly. Now that their subtle tactics have failed, they're preparing to switch to far more dangerous methods. Later that night, Atelier and Lysia arrive at Mimico's shop, both looking extremely serious. Lysia pulls down her hood, and the second Mimico and Uashia see her face, they're left speechless. They recognize her immediately, the third princess of the realm. Atelier quickly explains that someone placed a lethal curse on Lysia, but they still have no idea who is responsible. Considering Lysia is the only child born from the union of the king and princess France of Gurumaku, her very existence is the keystone maintaining peace between two powerful kingdoms. If someone wanted to reignite conflict, Lysia would be the perfect target. Mimico feels relieved that Lysia survived, but she's also left wondering, how was such a vicious curse broken? Lysia makes sure to give credit where it's due, explaining that a man named Kurt was the one who healed her. The moment Uashia and Mimico hear Kurt's name, their faces change, eyes widening in shock. They all sit down, still processing the news. Uashia can't believe it, Kurt was only gone for half a day, and somehow managed to cure a curse that experts wouldn't have been able to fix in years. They plan to properly thank him later, but for now, Mimico stresses that finding out who was behind the curse is far more urgent. Normally, Lysia's royal rune is heavily protected with anti-curse magic. That means someone had to tamper with it before the curse could latch on. Only 3 people had access to the rune during the critical window: Sanova Riskouts, the first general of the Royal Expeditionary Forces, Tristan Manel, Bishop of the Poland Church, and Isidora, the kingdom's third queen. They can't just start throwing accusations blindly, they need hard proof. Atelier suggests setting a trap to lure the real culprit out. Atelier already has a clever plan in mind. Since Liz just turned 15, royal tradition says she must go through a year of training. Given that someone had already tried to kill her, another attempt seems inevitable. Ateliers' strategy is to announce that Liz will be studying under a master, but it'll be a completely fake master at a fake location. The idea is to bait whoever cursed her into making a move. To make the trap believable, they need a master with real prestige, and Uashia knows exactly the person to help. She hands Atelier one of the magic crystals Kurt crafted, and the moment Atelier sees it, she's stunned. The craftsmanship and the magic quality are leagues above anything she's ever seen, it's simply perfect. Meanwhile, Kurt heads to Atelier's place the next day to continue his work. When he arrives, he finds a note on the door saying she's out. As he's standing there, Michelle shows up and explains that Atelier left with Lysia the day before and hasn't returned yet. With no assignments available, Kurt is left at loose ends. A bit disappointed, he decides to stop by the guild for a meal. While he's eating, he overhears a group at the next table panicking. Their porter has fallen sick, and without one, they can't complete their next mission. They don't have time to find a replacement either, which means they'll have to cancel. Kurt listens for a bit, then figures he could handle the porter's duties easily enough. He walks over and offers his help, openly admitting he's not much use in a fight but confident he can manage the heavy lifting. Singh laughs at him, calling him too scrawny to survive. Kanan quickly smacks her for being rude but still doubts Kurt's abilities since their mission involves moving golems weighing over 200 kilos each. Kurt just smiles and says 200 kilos isn't an issue. To prove it, he effortlessly lifts both Kanan and Danzo at once, despite Kanan wearing 150 kilos of armor, like it's nothing. That display leaves them stunned, and they happily accept Kurt as their substitute porter. As they travel to the mission site, the team introduces themselves properly. Kanan is the frontliner who prefers hand-to-hand combat despite carrying a sword, Danzo is the samurai, and Singh handles ranged attacks. Normally they have a 5th member, but he's homesick, which is why they needed Kurt today. They welcome him warmly, and Kurt, humble as ever, thanks them for giving a weakling like him a shot. The group is a little thrown off since no one that can lift 400 kilos that easily should call themselves weak, but they chalk it up to either humility or weird humor. As they continue on, Kurt suddenly screams, making everyone jump and spin around, ready for battle, only to see him grappling frantically with a slime. Kurt is totally panicking, and Cena has to jump in, telling him to calm down. All he has to do is aim for the slime's core to defeat it. Kurt tries to do exactly that, but when he stabs at the core, his knife just bounces off harmlessly. And somehow he ends up poking himself instead. It's obvious he has no fighting ability whatsoever. Seeing this, Cena steps in and cleanly slices the slime in two. She's taken aback at how terrible Kurt's form really is. He did warn them earlier that he wasn't good at combat, but she didn't realize it was this bad. Feeling embarrassed, Kurt apologizes, but the rest of the team shrugs it off. They tell him not to worry, his role is just to support them during quests, not to fight. That's their job. Kurt is flawed. He just messed up badly, yet no one is angry, they're actually being nice to him. It's a complete shift from how he was treated back when he was with Dragon Fang. He's honestly just grateful to have found a team like this. After a bit more walking, they finally reach the entrance to the cave. It's completely dark inside. Cena spreads some glow moss around to light the area, and with better visibility, Kurt notices something strange on a nearby rock. Nervously, he points it out and asks if it's something dangerous. One look and Cena tells him it's goblin droppings, and fresh, too. That means a goblin nest is likely close. Hearing that, Kurt starts to freak out again. If he couldn't even handle a slime, how is he supposed to survive fighting goblins? But Kans reassures him, if it's just a few, they can handle it. The real danger is if they run into an entire horde, then it's over. The key is to move quietly and not make too much noise. They push deeper into the cave and eventually come across a set of old ruins. As they move along, Kurt feels something off about one of the walls. He's trying to figure it out when Sina spots a goblin nearby and immediately tries to take it out. Unfortunately, she's just a second too slow. The goblin gets out a scream before she can silence it. And now, echoing through the tunnels, they hear the pounding footsteps of dozens of goblins closing in fast from both directions. This wasn't part of the plan. The quest report never said anything about a horde. Now they're badly outnumbered, with no exit in sight. Sigma glances at Danzo, hoping he's got an idea. But after a quick look around, it's clear, the only choice is to fight and pray they survive. Just then, Kurt shouts that he found a hidden passage behind the wall. It's a huge relief, but even with a secret exit, there's no way all of them can outrun the goblins together. They'll need a distraction. Danzo and Kant exchange a knowing look with Sina. Without hesitation, she grabs Kurt and shoves him through the hidden door, slamming it shut behind them. Kurt panics, asking why she locked it when Danzo and Kans are still outside. Sina explains that it's part of the plan. If all four of them tried to run, the goblins would chase them down. Danzo and Kans chose to act as bait, fighting to hold the goblins off, giving Kurt and Sina a real chance to escape. They all know it's a one-way mission. Kurt is desperate to turn back, but Sina stops him. She hates leaving teammates behind too, but there's no other choice. Kurt is too injured to fight, and her own combat skills are only average. If they stayed, they'd just slow Danzo and Kans down. This is how it has to be. Even so, she clings to a sliver of hope, insisting the others will survive somehow, but deep down, Danzo and Kans know the odds are grim. Still, they have no regrets. If they're going to fall, they'd rather do it while protecting their comrades, the greatest honor they believe in. Sina then tells Kurt they have to move, scattering some glow moss to light the area and find an exit. But then her expression hardens. This isn't just a hidden passage, it's a boss chamber. They're not alone. Standing before them is an iron dragon. Meanwhile, back in town, Lysia tells Yuashia she wants to see Kurt again. Yuashia agrees and takes her to his inn. When they arrive, Yuashia casually picks the lock and they slip inside, but the room is empty. Suddenly, a voice calls out, saying Kurt is out on a mission near the northeastern caves. Startled, Yuashia rushes outside to confront the speaker, but by the time she gets there, Bandana is already gone. Processing what she heard, Yuashia realizes Kurt might be in serious trouble. She recalls that not long ago, there was a goblin extermination exercise in that area. If any goblins survived, they might have regrouped into a nest. Yuashia immediately tells Lisa to stay back while she goes after Kurt, but Lisa refuses. If Kurt's in danger, she insists on helping. Yuashia points out the danger of dragging a princess into monster territory, but Lisa holds firm, saying she's been training in magic since childhood and can handle herself. Plus, Yuashia is supposed to protect her, meaning leaving her alone would be even riskier. Realizing she can't win, Yuashia reluctantly agrees. They head for the cave, and the moment they enter, they notice traces of glow moss still faintly shining on the walls. Someone came through recently. Lysia then casts a sensory spell, and Yuashia assumes she's enhancing her hearing to find Kurt. Instead, Lysia drops to all fours and starts sniffing the ground like a hunting dog. Despite only spending a short time with Kurt, she'd memorized his scent. After tracking it for a moment, she locks onto his trail, just as the sounds of battle echo down one of the tunnels. She quickly alerts Yuashia and buffs her stats to charge ahead. Elsewhere in the cave, Danzo and Kans are still locked in fierce combat, doing everything they can to hold the goblins back. Their stamina is fading, and their movements are slowing. Just as a goblin lunges in for a killing blow, a flash cuts through the swarm. Yuashia slices them down in one strike. Meanwhile, deeper in a sealed room, Sa has fallen to her knees, convinced that their end has come. There's no way they can defeat an Iron Dragon Golem with their current strength. Turning to Kurt, she apologizes for dragging him into this mess, but Kurt just smiles and tells her not to worry about it. Since he'd faced similar challenges many times before, Kurt stays calm while Sina watches in disbelief. As the massive creature lunges at him, Kurt effortlessly dodges, leaping onto its tail. With a light tap from his dagger, he slices the entire tail clean off. He continues, tapping each limb one by one, effortlessly severing them until the dragon golem collapses into scattered pieces. Sina can only gape in shock. How could someone who once struggled against slimes dismantle a dragon golem so easily? Frankly, she's a bit scared of him now. But Kurt doesn't see what the fuss is about. For him, dismantling golems is just another part of the job. Right then, Murisha bursts into the hidden chamber, ready for battle, only to find Kurt casually standing among the remains like it's nothing special. Kurt immediately brightens up upon seeing her and asks if she can check on Danzo and Kans, worried they might still be in danger. Murisha quickly reassures him that she already handled it. They're roughed up, but they'll recover. With everyone safe, the group regathers to discuss what happened. Danzo and Kans thank Murisha for saving their skins, joking that without her, they'd be goblin food by now. Mirisha brushes off their gratitude and turns to Kurt with something important on her mind. As Kurt begins loading up some dragon parts, Mirisha tells him she's opening a new atelier and invites him to join her. Kurt hesitates, feeling loyal to his current party, but Kant immediately encourages him to take the opportunity, insisting he shouldn't miss out. With their blessing, Kurt agrees to sign on. Mirisha also mentions she'll need some strong hands to guard the shop once it's open, and asks Kans and the others if they're interested. They eagerly agree, with Kans even suggesting they celebrate once they're back in town. Before that, though, Mirisha reminds Kurt to visit the guild office for an official skill evaluation. She's already arranged for a top appraiser. Later that day, Kurt arrives at the guild and is introduced to Mimiko, a royal court mage. She's heard whispers about his talents and personally offers to assess him. After the tests, she announces his skills as B rank, but it's a complete cover-up. In truth, Kurt's readings are off the charts, all triple S ranks, and his mana reserves are far beyond anything she's ever seen. Mimiko feels relieved she handled it herself, realizing if this information leaked, it could spark chaos across the kingdom. Unfortunately, Kursel, hiding nearby, overhears everything. The next morning, the team sets off toward the town where the new atelier is to be built. However, Mirisha still hasn't revealed who the workshop's new master will be. Kans is particularly curious, asking questions that Mirisha dodges awkwardly. By now, Shin has figured out that Mirisha had ulterior motives for inviting them. As they approach the town, Kurt suddenly realizes he's been to this place before. After returning to the spot where he once repaired the wall, Kurt couldn't help but feel uneasy, haunted by the belief that the Margrave had dismissed him over shoddy workmanship. The anxiety gnawed at him as Eurushia led everyone to the intended site for the Hellier workshop. However, calling it a workshop was a stretch. It was nothing but a barren patch of land. Kan, never one to sugarcoat things, bluntly pointed out that they couldn't exactly open a business on bare dirt. Eurushia quickly calmed him, explaining that she was well aware, and the group would stay at an inn while Kurt personally built the workshop. She then turned to Kurt and asked if he could have it done by the end of the day. Kurt, experienced as he was, knew that was impossible. Even with all his skills, he figured he'd need at least 3 days. Understanding his predicament, Eurushia assured him there was no urgency and he could take as long as he needed. She also promised to supply any materials he required. Relieved, Kurt handed her a mental list he had prepared in advance. Eurushia skimmed through it, noting expensive items like amethyst and griffin feathers, which immediately puzzled Sina. She couldn't fathom why such rare components were necessary for a simple workshop. Yet Eurushia, accustomed to Kurt's eccentricities, said nothing and simply promised to secure everything on the list. Gathering those materials would obviously take a couple of days, but Kurt was fine with the wait. Meanwhile, Carvo had a lingering suspicion that something suspicious was going on, and Eurushia noticed her wary looks, but neither confronted the other, each pretending all was well. Eventually, Eurushia told everyone to head for the inn so Kurt could work in peace. Before she left, she made Kurt promise to come back by nightfall to rest and eat properly. At the inn, once they were settled, Eurushia gathered everyone for an important announcement. Up until now, Kan and Danzo had assumed Kurt was just some talented commoner, but Eurushia knew it was time to reveal more, especially since Sina had already seen a glimpse of Kurt's unusual power. Sina immediately pressed Eurushia to explain who Kurt really was. Eurushia, however, chose to formally introduce herself first. Pulling out her royal family crest, she revealed that she was not just an adventurer but one serving directly under the royal family. She then motioned toward the girls seated with them and introduced Lysia as the third princess of the kingdom. Kan, Danzo, and Sina were dumbstruck. Kan even awkwardly rose to bow, but Lysia reassured him that such formalities were unnecessary. She was traveling incognito. Curious, Sina then asked whether that meant Kurt was a noble too, but Eurushia clarified, Kurt was neither royalty nor nobility. He was technically a civilian, albeit an extremely unusual one. Eurushia admitted she herself didn't know the full extent of his background. However, what she did know shocked everyone. While Kurt's combat abilities were officially ranked Chi, every other skill he possessed had been evaluated at the nearly unheard of level of triple S rank. The room fell silent. It sounded absurd, yet after seeing Kurt in action, it all started to make sense. Eurushia stressed that Kurt's true strength was considered a top secret, and none of them were allowed to discuss it with outsiders. Even more startling, Kurt himself had been kept in the dark. Eurushia and Mimiko had lied to him, telling him he was merely a B-rank adventurer. Eurushia had previously revealed that Kurt was intended to become the next Atelier master, though she had never planned to disclose the true reasons behind this decision. Upon hearing this, Sina stood up abruptly, anger flashing across her face. She confronted Eurushia, unable to fathom why she had lied to Kurt, especially about something so crucial. Eurushia attempted to justify herself, claiming Kurt wouldn't believe the truth, even if she told him. But Sina was not convinced. She vehemently rejected Eurushia's excuse, calling it absurd. Eurushia then tried another defense, arguing that she was simply trying to protect Kurt. If his true abilities became public knowledge, she feared others would exploit him. Sina, however, sharply retorted that it was Eurushia herself who was exploiting him, not the other way around. Faced with this accusation, Eurushia fell silent, unable to respond. Disgusted by the situation, Sina turned to Kans, signaling that she wanted nothing more to do with the mess they were in. After a brief pause, Danzo requested Lisa to elaborate on their predicament. Lisa nodded and explained that just a few days ago, Kurt had broken a deadly curse placed on her, simply by offering her a bowl of porridge. Now, someone was after her life, which is why they had come up with the plan to set up an Atelier master. The goal was to draw out the assassins, identify the culprit, and put an end to the threat. Of course, Kurt had no idea about any of this. Lisa admitted that it seemed selfish to involve Kurt without his knowledge, but she reassured them that both she and Ueshiya cared deeply for him and would never intentionally put him in harm's way. She then earnestly asked if they would keep the secret and help protect Kurt. Danzo took a moment before responding, explaining that as adventurers, they weren't obligated to follow the orders of any royal figure. However, since Kurt was their friend, they were willing to do whatever it took to keep him safe. Kans quickly echoed Danzo's sentiment, offering their full support. Lisa was relieved by their willingness to help, but Sina remained skeptical, especially considering they had only known Kurt for a mere 2 days. Ueshiya understood Sina's concerns. Even though she spoke of Kurt as though they had known each other for years, she had only met him last week. To this day, Ueshiya still found it hard to believe the extraordinary feats Kurt had already accomplished. Sina excused herself, saying she needed a walk to clear her mind before making any decisions. As she wandered through town, she found herself heading toward Kurt's worksite. She felt strongly that Kurt deserved to know the truth about his strength. But as she approached, she was taken aback by what she saw. In just a few hours, Kurt had single-handedly laid down the entire foundation for the workshop. She approached him, asking if he had really built all of this by himself. Kurt casually confirmed that he had, mentioning that he thought it was normal since Ueshiya had told him he was only B rank. Sina stared at him, stunned. There was no way a B-ranked worker could have completed something like this so quickly. It dawned on her that Kurt's perception of his own abilities was entirely skewed. Having grown up in a village where building a dozen houses in a single day was considered routine, Kurt saw this as nothing special. Still, Sina couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't right for Ueshiya to keep Kurt in the dark, especially when he was doing all this work. She asked him if he felt resentful about the heavy burden that had been placed on him. Kurt smiled gently and shook his head. He explained to her that he didn't feel burdened. Kurt had no reason to feel upset, especially since he found joy in being useful when he was part of the hero party. Despite them constantly belittling him, calling him worthless, and eventually booting him out, Kurt was now in a place where his worth was recognized, and that made him happier than words could express. Meanwhile, Danzo lingered in the town square for a meeting with a trusted informant, someone who looked suspiciously like Bandana. Remember how Danzo's group hired Kurt after their original porter fell ill? It turns out that wasn't just bad luck. The so-called porter, Bibernac, was actually a spy, planted with the mission of tearing Danzo's team apart from the inside. Some jealous adventurers, unable to tolerate Danzo's team's success, had paid Bibernac to sabotage them. The informant had already tracked Bibernac down and left Danzo with clear directions to find him. With this valuable intel in hand, Danzo paid her and set off to a local tavern. Inside, a bald, miserable man sulked into his drink. Not only had the waitress rejected him after he tried to grope her, but his scheme to destroy Danzo's group had failed miserably. Still, he was already scheming again, having recently heard that Danzo's party had teamed up with an Atelier workshop connected to the third princess. If he played his cards right, this could lead to a significant payday. Danzo, however, had other plans. From the shadows, he asked Bibernac if he was enjoying what might be his last drink. The words froze Bibernac in his tracks, and he immediately bolted for the door in a panic. He dashed down the alley but tripped over a wire placed perfectly across his path, crashing hard to the ground. Danzo approached without haste, quickly realizing that Bibernac's sick leave for the mining job had been a cover-up. Bibernac feigned ignorance, but it was too late. Danzo drew his sword and swung at Bibernac's neck, but stopped just before making contact. Instead of spilling blood, Danzo leaned in and warned Bibernac to stay away from him and his team. If he showed up again, Danzo promised, he wouldn't hesitate next time. With that, Danzo walked off, and Bandana, who had been watching from a distance, felt a surge of frustration. Danzo had let Bibernac go, and she knew he'd cause trouble later. Just as she was about to handle the problem herself, two hooded figures appeared and hauled Bibernac away. Bandana immediately recognized them as part of the Phantom Squad, directly reporting to Mimiko. She wondered why a royal court mage was involved in this. It was then that her messenger Crow arrived, delivering a letter from her superior. The letter ordered her to back off, as Marface had taken authority over the situation. Another disappointment, but Bandana had no choice but to follow orders. With nothing left to do, she decided to head back to Kurt's village. Meanwhile, Marlice wasn't having a good day either. She had been captured and was now trapped inside a magic circle. Back in town, Danzo and Kans were completely stunned the next morning when they saw what Kurt had built. The man had even managed to grow trees and shrubs, and neither of them could figure out how he had managed it overnight. Everyone is stunned, except for Lisa, who's lost in her daydreams about marrying Kurt and living with him here forever. Kurt walks in to greet everyone, invites them inside, and gives them a tour of the place. He starts with the entrance, then shows off the 2 basement floors, and even the custom water purification system he built using magical gems. He made sure there's enough room for everyone, including a special one reserved for the Atelier master. Speaking of which, Kurt still doesn't realize that he's supposed to be the Atelier master. Ueshiya decides to hold off on telling him for now and quickly makes up a story, saying that the Atelier master is delayed. She then casually asks Kurt where his room is, but Kurt, ever the humble soul, replies that he doesn't need one. He figures he'll just crash in a broom closet since he's only good for running errands. The others immediately shut that idea down, insisting he use the Atelier master's room instead, but convincing him takes a full 2 hours. Then, Ueshiya asks Kurt if he could set up a barrier around the house to block out any curses. Kurt admits he's never made a barrier before and isn't sure if he can manage it. So, Ueshiya decides to rely on the backup ward spells Mimiko left behind and spends the whole night setting them up around the property. The final seal needs to go right outside Lisa's room, so Ueshiya heads there to place it. However, as soon as Lisa hears footsteps in the hallway, she assumes Kurt is trying to sneak into her room and rushes to the door, ready to greet him with open arms. But when she sees it's just Ueshiya, she's clearly disappointed, as she was hoping to rope Kurt into cuddling with her for the night. Ueshiya tells her to cut out the weird fantasies and warns her not to mess with Kurt's innocent mind, especially since he's the kind of guy who would do anything just to feel useful. If she told him to plow her field, he'd probably grab a shovel and start digging the next day. Meanwhile, Kurt is in the kitchen preparing breakfast for everyone. Lisa strolls in, wearing nothing but an apron, and the others lose it, telling her to stop corrupting the poor guy. Lisa shrugs it off, saying she has clothes on underneath. Barely, but still. Once breakfast is ready, the group sits down to eat, and everyone is blown away by how good the food tastes. But Ueshiya notices something odd. Kurt isn't with them. Lisa mentions hearing him talk earlier about wanting to clean up some graffiti someone had drawn on the mansion walls. Ueshiya freezes, realizing that the graffiti he mentioned was definitely the set of barrier spells she placed last night. Normally, no one could just scrub off a ward with a rag, but Kurt's the one in question, so Ueshiya rushes out in a panic to stop him. But she's already too late. He's wiped out every single spell, still thinking it was just random doodles. She never told him about the curse assassination attempt targeting Lisa, and now, thanks to his overachieving nature, Lisa is completely exposed to curses once again. With no one around to place another set of barriers, Ueshiya is at a loss for what to do next. Meanwhile, Mal has been summoned to a meeting with the church bishop. When she arrives, he bluntly informs her that she's being excommunicated. Stunned, Mal demands to know why. The bishop explains that multiple complaints and solid evidence have surfaced regarding the violent and destructive behavior of the Flaming Dragon Party. To make matters worse, he's received word that Golova has been declared a wanted criminal, and the church wants to sever all ties with her before things escalate further. Mal, desperate, tries to defend herself, insisting she hasn't done anything wrong, aside from the one incident where she casually electrocuted a minimum wage waiter with level 5 lightning magic. In her defense, she argues the food he served was awful, and he totally deserved it. Obviously, that excuse won't hold up in court, but the bishop isn't exactly a saint either. Sensing an opportunity, he tells Mal that he's willing to overlook her minor sins and even promote her to the rank of priest, but only if she does one small favor for him. When Mal hears the offer of promotion, her eyes practically light up like a kid in a candy store. She eagerly agrees to whatever he requests, ready to comply in any way, even if it means metaphorically or otherwise kneeling. However, the situation quickly takes an unexpected turn. The bishop casually pours a glass of wine and offers it to her. Without hesitation, she drinks it. But instead of what she envisioned, the bishop calmly reveals that he wants her to assassinate the third princess of the kingdom. Malapist would typically refuse such a request outright, but by the time she realizes the full extent of the situation, it's too late. The wine was laced with a deadly curse, one that ensures a slow and painful death unless she complies. Left with no other options, Malapist swears loyalty to the bishop's plan, which unfortunately for her involves being sealed inside a magic circle alongside a demon to guarantee her obedience. Back at Kurt's mansion, things are peaceful. The group enjoys a hearty breakfast, and surprisingly, Lisa hasn't suffered any new curses, despite Kurt accidentally wiping out all the previous protective spells. Ueshiya still hasn't figured out why Lisa is safe from new curses, but Kurt's magic-infused cooking, with its powerful purification properties, seems to be neutralizing any attempts before they can take hold. It appears that Lisa's safety isn't at risk anymore, especially now that Mimiko has arrived in town. With Mother Filia's assistance, they've started building an intricate information network to uncover any threats against Lisa. Lizia notices something different about the cake Kurt made today and asks him about it. Kurt explains that he used rice flour instead of wheat flour. Lisa loves the flavor, as it reminds her of the rice porridge Kurt made for her when they first met. She excitedly asks if he'd be willing to make it again if she ever gets cursed. Kurt, with a warm smile, assures her he'd be happy to make as much rice porridge as she wants, although he also reassures her that she doesn't need to worry about being cursed anymore. Iris, hearing this, looks surprised and asks Kurt how he can be so confident, especially after telling her earlier that he couldn't set up anti-curse barriers. Kurt confirms that while he can't set up barriers within the mansion, the entire house itself acts as a massive curse barrier. Any curse magic aimed at them will automatically reflect back onto the sender. Kurt also mentions that he made a few adjustments to the barrier for extra protection. As fate would have it, at that exact moment, one of the assassins targeting Lisa decides to cast a powerful curse. The magician begins his ritual, aiming for his most potent curse yet. But instead of hitting Lisa, the magic immediately backfires. The curse dissipates harmlessly and rebounds onto the caster, causing his body to glow like an electric lamp. Kurt had designed the barrier this way intentionally, wanting to avoid outright killing anyone, no matter how deserving, in favor of a more humane response. Yuashia is once again left speechless by Kurt's incredible skill. She's relieved to see Kurt doing so much to protect Lisa but knows that she needs to join Atelier and Mimiko immediately to track down anyone who now looks like they've swallowed a spotlight. With Yuashia occupied, Kurt casually walks over to Lisa and asks if she would like to go shopping with him. Lisa is completely stunned, as this feels like Kurt is asking her out on a date. Kurt simply thinks it would be nice to take a walk through the city, especially since Lisa hasn't had the chance to leave the mansion yet. Overwhelmed but touched, Lisa thanks him for the offer, though considering the current situation. She regretfully informs him that she can't go out, just as atop the city walls, Margaret of Alad and his Vice-General Generic survey the horizon with growing concern. A massive horde of monsters is advancing toward the city. Still, there's no immediate need to panic, as the walls have been fully repaired, and their army is ready to defend at a moment's notice. At the same time, Yuashia, Mimiko, and Atelier finally track down the human light bulb, only to discover that his own comrades have killed him. They must have realized that dragging around a glowing corpse would attract too much attention. Despite this, Yuashia is surprised that Kurt's glowing curse remains active even after death. It's quite impressive for a spell he whipped up on short notice. Atelier suggests they come clean to Kurt and ask for his help, as it would make finding the assassins easier. However, Yuashia hesitates, not wanting to drag Kurt into this more than she already has, even though she knows deep down that he's already far too involved. Just then, alarm bells start ringing throughout the city. The monsters have begun their assault. On the walls, the Margrave orders his soldiers to fire light spells to illuminate the battlefield. When the light reveals the enemy, his heart sinks. An endless horde of skeletons is slowly advancing toward the walls, and there's no way his troops can hold the line against such numbers. Realizing this, he orders a portion of his forces to stay behind and fight to the death if necessary, buying time for the rest to focus on evacuating as many civilians as possible. The Margrave is fully prepared to lay down his life for his people. But just as the skeletons reach the outer walls, something incredible happens. They begin vanishing one by one, dissolving into nothingness. The Margrave has no idea what's going on until it hits him. This section of the wall was rebuilt by Kurt. Somehow, Kurt must have enchanted the walls to purify the monsters. In the end, the entire skeleton army is wiped out without a single casualty. Meanwhile, we return to Marlice, still trapped within the demon's magic circle. The bishop had made a pact with an advanced class demon, fueling its summoning magic with Marlice mana. After the first wave fails miserably, the demon begins preparing more skeletons, planning to drain Marlice's life force until there's nothing left of her. Back inside the city, Kurt receives word of the attack and asks Yuashia if they're going to be alright. Yuashia explains that the city is now surrounded on all sides by monsters, and while the knights are scrambling to form a counterattack, there's only so much they can do given the situation. The only reason the city hasn't fallen yet is because a large portion of the skeletons were purified the moment they reached the walls. Kurt explains that he enchanted the walls during the repairs and considers such things basic maintenance back in his village. He's genuinely surprised that people here never thought to enchant their walls. That said, Kurt only had the chance to reinforce 2 of the city's 4 walls. If the skeletons shift their attack to the unprotected sections, they could break through the city walls very quickly. Lisa, ever logical, politely asks Kurt if he could create a weapon to wipe out all the skeletons at once. Kurt starts seriously considering it, but before he can respond, Yuashia abruptly cuts in, announcing that she needs to step out for a while before leaving. Yuashia sternly warns both Kurt and Lizia that they are strictly prohibited from leaving the mansion, no matter the circumstances. Lizia, content with the restriction, looks forward to uninterrupted time with Kurt. Meanwhile, Yuashia heads to the storage room, retrieving a box filled with the potent magic crystals Kurt had previously crafted. Armed with this powerful weapon, Yuashia quickly meets with Felilia and Mimiko to discuss their next move. As they approach the Margrave, Aura immediately recognizes Yuashia from their past encounters, but is taken aback by her appearance in this unexpected location. Yuashia doesn't waste time and lays out her plan to stop the skeleton invasion. She suggests striking at the source of the monsters, an area near the ruins, by attacking directly. For this to succeed, Aura's soldiers would need to act as a diversion, pulling the skeletons away long enough for her team to reach the ruins. Aura is skeptical, believing the plan to be far too dangerous, but Yuashia, confident and resolute, reveals one of Kurt's magic crystals. She explains that these crystals hold enough power to destroy an entire building, enough to obliterate the ruins and sever the skeleton army at its source. Seeing her determination, Aura agrees to the plan, but only with one condition: he insists on joining the strike team himself. Although Yuashia knows Aura is capable in battle, she questions whether he's truly willing to risk his life for this mission. Aura remains steadfast, believing it's his duty to protect the city. With his vice-general, Jan Eric, leading the main force and Mimiko and Felilia safeguarding the civilians, he's free to join the operation. Back at the mansion, Kurt finishes tending to the garden, but his thoughts drift to Lizia's earlier suggestion about crafting a weapon. With renewed purpose, he heads to the forge he built and starts working. Although he still struggles with self-doubt, Kurt is determined to contribute to his friend's cause. He recalls how, back in his village, blacksmiths created amazing weapons effortlessly. Though unsure of his own abilities, Kurt pushes forward, committed to forging a weapon worthy of the task ahead. Meanwhile, as Yuashia and Aura prepare to set out, they're confronted by a swarm of monsters. Yuashia reacts quickly, pulling out one of Kurt's magic crystals and preparing it for use. She warns the soldiers to shield their eyes. When the crystal strikes the ground, a brilliant flash of light erupts, annihilating the monsters in an instant. Yuashia had known Kurt's crystals were powerful, but she never expected them to eradicate such a large number of enemies in one blow. Nonetheless, the result is a huge advantage, clearing the path for the soldiers to fend off the next wave while Yuashia and Aura continue their march toward the ruins. Back at the mansion, Kurt finishes forging the blade, but as he makes the final adjustments, old insecurities resurface. He recalls a time when he was told his blacksmithing skills were only B rank, and doubts creep into his mind. He wonders if the sword he's crafted is truly good enough to fight against real monsters. A few minutes later, Lisa walks in, looking for Kurt to ask about dinner. Her gaze lands on the sword he's holding, and she's immediately struck by how beautiful it looks. Noticing her reaction, Kurt shyly offers it to her, telling her she can keep it if she likes it that much. However, he warns her to be careful, as he's infused the blade with quite a bit of magical energy. Lisa thanks him for the gift, but despite Kurt being completely unaware of his own abilities, he can still recognize when a smile is forced. It's clear something is bothering Lisa, and Kurt has been sensing it for a while. He decides to ask her directly if someone is after her. Surprised by his insight, Lisa admits he's right and apologizes for causing all the trouble. Kurt reassures her there's no need to apologize, but Lisa still feels guilty. She knows everyone around her keeps getting caught up in danger because of her, and right now, Yuashia is out there risking her life for her sake. Though Kurt has figured out someone's after Lisa, he still has no idea that she's actually a princess or that her safety is crucial for national security. All he knows is that Yuashia is handling something near the ruins, and he vaguely remembers Golova once vandalizing those same ruins. Kurt, putting the pieces together incorrectly, assumes Yuashia must be fighting some bizarre graffiti artist who's been stalking Lisa. His conclusion is far from the truth, but it doesn't change the fact that Yuashia is out there fighting for Lisa, and Kurt hates feeling powerless to help. His combat skills are lacking, and he can't bear sitting idly by while his friends are in danger. Lisa shares Kurt's frustration. She hates the idea of others putting themselves at risk to protect her and would rather fight for herself if only she was strong enough. When she brings it up, Kurt casually suggests they go after the culprit themselves. Lisa immediately agrees, but points out a major obstacle: the city is surrounded by monsters, so how can they even get out? Without missing a beat, Kurt assures her it won't be a problem, he has his own ways of dealing with such challenges. Meanwhile, far out on the battlefield, Yuashia suddenly shivers, a deep instinct telling her that Kurt is probably about to do something wild again. At the mansion, Lizia was gearing up for battle when she realized she hadn't tested the enchanted sword Kurt had given her. Intrigued by its magic, she raised it high, eager to see what it could do. To her surprise, nothing happened. Just then, Kurt entered the room, asking if she was ready. As Lizia turned to face him, she saw the sword had somehow activated, sparking a change she hadn't expected. Meanwhile, Eurizia and Alraid were still struggling through the hordes of undead. The team had made progress, reducing the numbers, but there were still too many to handle. Eurizia had been relying heavily on magic crystals, but her stock was running low. Suddenly, Alraid was hit by one of the monsters, a blow to his abdomen. Eurizia tried to reach him, but the undead swarmed her, preventing her from accessing another crystal in time to defend herself. Just as things seemed dire, Kans and the others arrived, having heard about the situation. They'd completed their mission and rushed back to help. Together, they found the source of the monster summons, and Eurizia used one of the magic crystals to obliterate all the creatures around them, clearing a path to the entrance of the building. Afterward, she gave Alraid some of Kurt's healing soup, and once he had recovered, they readied themselves to move on. Although more monsters began appearing from the building, Kans and the others held them off, allowing Eurizia and Alraid to enter the structure without interference. Elsewhere, deep in the ruins, Malefus was being drained of her mana. If things continued at this rate, she would die, but the demon in control of the situation didn't care about her fate. What caught his attention, however, was the unexpected resistance the humans were putting up. He was particularly impressed by Eurizia and Alraid, who had already breached the ruins, so he decided to face them directly. As they navigated the corridors, Eurizia and Alraid eventually discovered the source of the undead. Eurizia threw one of Kurt's magic crystals into the chamber, destroying both the creatures and the spell that had been summoning them. She was amazed at how smoothly it had gone, but of course, it wouldn't be that easy. Moments later, the demon appeared before them, challenging them to fight. Eurysia charged forward, using the magic crystal as a weapon, but when it struck the demon, nothing happened. The demon smirked, declaring it had infinite HP. Alraid, not buying the claim, slashed the demon's midsection, but the wound immediately healed itself. The demon wasn't regenerating because it had infinite health, but because it was siphoning Maleficus's mana at an alarming rate to heal itself, draining her life force with every second. The demon then acknowledged to Alraid and Eurysia that they were far more impressive than the typical humans it had encountered, but in the end, they were still no match for it. The same went for all their allies fighting outside. Despite their best efforts to defend the city, the relentless wave of undead would eventually overwhelm them. Alraid, standing firm, retorted that none of his comrades would fall to such a monstrous foe, but the demon merely smirked and stated that it could summon endless waves, grinding them down to nothing. Even the 3 fighters outside would not survive the next assault. Yet, Eurysia and Alraid refused to accept that fate. In a coordinated strike, Eurysia decapitated the demon while Alraid drove his sword through its heart. But to their shock, the demon casually reattached its head and continued its taunts. It promised to slaughter all the knights, then target the princess. For its amusement, the demon suggested sparing Eurysia and Alraid, letting them live just long enough to witness Lysia's slow, agonizing demise. Eurysia was desperate to prevent such a cruel fate but felt powerless. Nothing they did seemed to work, and even Kurt's magic crystals had proven ineffective against the demon's power. Meanwhile, Maleficus had resigned herself to the inevitable. Her strength had dwindled so much that even if she managed to escape the magical circle, she lacked the energy to flee. Worse still, the curse the bishop had placed on her meant she hadn't eaten in days, leaving her weaker and more famished than ever. She found herself wishing for just one more taste of Kurt's cooking before her life ended. In her delirium, she thought she heard Kurt's voice calling her name. But it wasn't a hallucination. Kurt and Lysia had just broken through to the chamber. Maleficus was stunned to see Kurt there, and even more shocked to see that he had brought the princess with him. She quickly wondered if Kurt had figured out her involvement in the plot to kill Lysia and brought the princess here to witness the end. However, Kurt hadn't known Maleficus was even involved until he arrived. He looked at her and asked bluntly if she was behind the attempts on Lysia's life. Maleficus explained that she had been expelled from the church and manipulated by Bishop Tristan into this position. Both Kurt and Lysia heard her explanation, but each interpreted it differently. Lysia immediately realized that Tristan was the mastermind behind all the assassination attempts on her, while Kurt assumed Maleficus had just been scribbling out her frustrations after being cast out. Neither Maleficus nor Lysia understood Kurt's interpretation, but Lysia supported whatever Kurt said, regardless of how nonsensical it seemed. Kurt then asked Maleficus if she had any idea where Eurysia might be. Maleficus didn't recognize the name Eurysia, but she recalled seeing 2 adventurers earlier, likely on the floor above. Kurt thanked her for the information and quickly prepared to search for Eurysia, still intent on leaving Maleficus behind, as he dismissed the magic circle as mere graffiti. But Lysia intervened, asking him to clean up the circle while she went to find Eurysia herself. Kurt tried to dissuade her, warning her of the danger in going alone, but Lysia pointed out that he had given her a magic sword, so she would be fine. He reluctantly agreed, and as Lysia left, Kurt somehow found a mop and bucket and began scrubbing away. Maleficus watched, bemused, knowing that no amount of water or cleaning would erase a magic circle. Yet, Kurt seemed unaware of the impossibility, scrubbing it as if it were any ordinary mess. As soon as the circle was disrupted, a demon felt its mana severed, no longer able to absorb attacks. It quickly dodged as Eurysia and Alraid launched their strikes, both confused by the change, but realizing that the demon was now evading in fear. Eurysia reached into her bag for her last remaining magic crystal, hoping to end the fight, but the demon knocked it from her hand before she could use it. With no other options, their chances of victory seemed slim. Just as the demon prepared to strike with full force, Lysia appeared, calling to Eurysia. The demon, which had targeted Lysia from the start, immediately stabbed her, killing her instantly and mocking her for being reckless. However, to its surprise, Lysia's body dissolved into butterflies, revealing that it had struck a decoy. The demon, unable to comprehend, believed it had killed the real Lysia, but what it had destroyed was merely an illusion created by the Sword of Confusion. The sword's power generated perfect illusions, bewildering the enemy by showing disjointed images or, as in this case, a flawless replica of Lysia. The demon continued to try and kill Lysia, but every strike passed through another illusion. While it chased the false images, the real Lysia had quietly moved to the crystal Eurysia had dropped. She crushed the crystal, unleashing an explosive surge of energy that obliterated the demon. With the demon's death, the undead horde it had been sustaining vanished, and the city was finally free from the threat. The people could relax, knowing they were safe. However, Eurysia was furious with Lysia for putting herself in such a dangerous situation. Lysia apologized for arriving without prior consent but confessed that she couldn't continue hiding while others fought to protect her. Eurysia, though frustrated, knew she had no real right to chastise Lysia. After all, had Lysia not intervened when she did, both she and Alraid would have perished at the hands of the demon. Alraid, eager to thank Lysia for saving him, was swiftly told there was no need. Lysia noted that he had fought with greater resolve than she had and that his efforts in defending the city deserved more recognition. She promised to reward him for his bravery. Meanwhile, Kurt finished erasing the last traces of the magic circle. However, even with the circle gone, the curse Maleficus carried from the demon's magic remained, preventing her from consuming food. It seemed only a matter of time before she would starve to death. Recognizing her hunger, Kurt offered her some of his lunch, an act of kindness that Maleficus deeply appreciated. But she knew the curse would make her vomit it back up. Still, she chose to eat it anyway, just to savor the taste of Kurt's cooking one last time before her inevitable end. To her surprise, as soon as she took the first bite, Maleficus realized she could eat it without issue. Within moments, the curse lifted from her stomach entirely. It was clear that Kurt's food had broken the curse, and Maleficus was taken aback by this revelation. For the first time, she understood what Kurt was truly capable of. Her thoughts drifted to everything Kurt had done for her and the rest of the Flaming Dragon Party. She finally grasped the truth: the strength of their group had always been supported by Kurt's efforts in the shadows. A wave of genuine regret washed over her, and she offered him a heartfelt apology for the way she had treated him in the past. Now, Maleficus wasn't suddenly a kind person, she was still, well, Maleficus. But at least she was beginning to see Kurt's value, and that was a step in the right direction. While Maleficus may have evaded immediate punishment, the situation quickly catches up to her as two agents from Mimico arrive to arrest her for her role in the assassination plot. In a panic, Maleficus calls out to Kurt for help, but Kurt, ever calm, simply reassures her that he'll bring her food during her prison time whenever she wants. As she's hauled off to prison, Lizier approaches Kurt to check on him. Kurt assures her he's fine, though he admits he's more concerned about Ulysses and the others who were engaged in the battle. Lizier comforts him, letting him know they're all alright since they'd each received some of the healing soup Kurt had prepared. Once everyone returns from the battlefield, Kurt invites the group to a grand feast at his mansion. However, as they sit down to eat, the soldiers remain oddly quiet, simply enjoying their food without speaking. Kurt worries they might be eating out of politeness, but Alraid quickly reassures him. It turns out, the silence isn't out of obligation but because the food is so extraordinary, they're all focused on savoring each bite as much as possible. Relieved, Kurt smiles at the thought of them enjoying the meal. As everyone continues eating, Lizier calls Alraid over to introduce him to Kurt. Kurt recognizes him as the foreman who managed the repairs on the city walls, but Lizier reveals that Alraid also holds a leadership position and is responsible for overseeing the governance of the city and its people. Just then, a brilliant display of fireworks erupts in the sky, capturing everyone's attention. Kurt reveals that he had arranged the fireworks as a special touch to accompany the meal. Afterward, Alraid remarks that the food had a surprising effect. All of his injuries had healed after eating. Kurt, nonchalant, finds this unremarkable, explaining that back in his village, it was a common belief that a good meal could heal the body. He finds it hard to believe this would be surprising to anyone. With that, the episode concludes. Subscribe to stay updated for the next chapter. The story flashes back to Kurt's childhood, set in the enigmatic Haast village where he lived. One day, he approaches a girl named Hildegard, who harbors a demon, and who seems lost in her own world. Curious, Kurt asks if she's the daughter of the traveling merchant. Hilda doesn't respond at first, but Kurt keeps trying to engage her, going so far as to tear up in an effort to get her attention. Eventually, she speaks up, explaining that her father warned her not to talk to the villagers. According to Hilda, her father sees the villagers as odd, and worries she might be affected by their peculiar nature if she interacts with them. Despite that, Hilda tells Kurt that she's simply talking to herself. Playing along, Kurt says the same about himself. Through this playful pretense, the two exchange names and quickly bond. Soon after becoming friends, Kurt invites Hilda on a ride up the mountains to see some beautiful rainbow-colored flowers. They travel on his iron golem companion, and along the way, Hilda spots some berries and eats them without realizing they're poisonous. Luckily, young as he is, Kurt knows enough to act fast. He gathers specific herbs, grinds them into a paste, and in an awkward but urgent move, chews the antidote and transfers it to her to save her life. The scene fades out, revealing that this moment is part of a dream Kurt is having while riding in a carriage with Ulysses and their fellow adventurers. They're en route to a village that requested help. Once they arrive, the local chief explains the issue: the river that once sustained the village has dried up, leaving their crops to wither. Ulysses examines a map and notices a nearby reservoir that feeds into both villages. However, there's a catch. The neighboring village's head refuses to release any water, despite repeated efforts at negotiation. That's why the desperate villagers turn to the Atelier, hoping their influence could help convince the other village to cooperate. After understanding the situation, Ulysses returns to inform the others, only to be told by Danzo that the rest of the group went uphill. Apparently, an elderly man responsible for tending birds threw his back out, and Kurt, as the Atelier Meister, was sent to assist him. Ulysses believes Kurt can manage on his own, so she mounts her horse and heads off to the neighboring village to resolve the issue herself. Once she arrives and introduces herself to the village chief, she's met with unexpected desperation. The chief drops to her knees and pleads for help, explaining that the reservoir they depended on has also gone dry. Ulysses is baffled and can only hope that divine intervention brings rain. Just then, two villagers rush in, trying to describe a strange event happening atop the hill, but they're too shaken to explain what they saw. Ulysses rushes over and spots Carnes and Cena gazing in amazement at a massive lake that now stretches before them. Confused, Ulysses questions why the villagers would claim there's a water shortage if such a vast water source exists. Cena, unsure of how to explain the bizarre sight, simply tells her that the lake only appeared a short while ago. Before Ulysses can process it, Kurt comes jogging over with an innocent look on his face. Ulysses immediately suspects he had something to do with it. She asks why he's not attending to the old man's back, and Kurt casually responds that he noticed the old man's birds were incredibly parched. So, he tapped into a deep aquifer beneath the area, an unknown rock formation holding this immense water reserve. Soon after, both village elders show up and kneel before Ulysses, overflowing with gratitude, believing she's the one who saved them. Meanwhile, Kurt, completely oblivious, looks up at Ulysses in admiration, assuming she resolved the issue single-handedly, never realizing it was actually his actions that fixed the crisis. With the situation handled, the group prepares to head home, having been gifted several bird eggs in thanks. Kurt excitedly shares his culinary ideas: omelets, pancakes, maybe even sweets. He then asks about Lies. Ulysses tells him she's gone to meet the Lord of Tychone to report on the recent undead incident. The story transitions to a dinner scene where Lies and Alraid are seated with Mangrave Tychone. This shrewd noble, who has a status similar to a duke, is clearly trying to pull political strings by charming Lies. Lies is fully aware of Mangrave's manipulative intentions but plays along, remembering she's here as the Atelier's envoy, not a royal figure. Mangrave probes for details about the Atelier Meister, trying to learn more about the person responsible for fending off the undead threat. Lies dodges his inquiries carefully, determined to shield Kurt from being dragged into political games. As they continue speaking, Mangrave turns the topic toward the Atelier's town, noting that it still lacks an official name. Lies explains that naming a town requires the appointment of a viceroy by the kingdom. Using his authority, Mangrave expresses interest in appointing the Atelier Meister to the role. Immediately, Lies sees through his maneuver, is aiming to gain control over Kurt. But since Kurt isn't even aware of his role as the Atelier Meister, Lies knows she can't let this happen. She politely says that the decision isn't hers alone to make. Mangrave grows suspicious. He points out that as both princess and Atelier representative, she should have some decision-making power. Lies, caught off guard, doesn't know how to respond. The tension rises as Mangrave then turns to Alraid. He asks Alraid, commander of the town's knights, if he has any objections to naming the Atelier Meister as viceroy. Lies anxiously hopes Alraid is as unaware of Kurt's identity as she thinks. Unknowingly, Alraid agrees right away. Lies is forced to interrupt yet again, bringing up another objection to stall the appointment. This leads Mangrave to wonder if there's some underlying issue or shortcoming in the Atelier Meister that disqualifies him for the position. His remark offends Lies a lot, and unable to restrain herself, she declares with pride that no one in the nation surpasses the Atelier Meister in talent. Unfortunately, her passionate praise of Kurt only confirms Mangrave's suspicions. Wearing a smug smile, he confidently announces that the Atelier Meister will, without a doubt, be named the new viceroy. Lysalot hurries back to the Atelier with shocking news that throws everyone into confusion. Ulysses worries that this might force them to present Kurt as the Atelier Meister, which is a huge issue, because Kurt himself doesn't even realize that he is the Meister. She proposes finding someone else to impersonate the Atelier Meister to quickly resolve the matter. However, this plan quickly falls apart. Every knight has seen Kurt, and they all know who he truly is. No one would believe in a substitute who lacks his strength and reputation. Initially, Lysalot agrees with Ulysses' suggestion, but when she realizes this would mean replacing her beloved with someone else, she snaps, screaming that she won't allow it. There is no other person like Kurt in the entire city, no, in the entire world. She demands to know where he is, and Ulysses jokingly says he's busy raising a child. What? Her lover has a child that isn't hers? If there's anyone who jumps to wild conclusions, it's Lysalot. She shouts that even if the child isn't hers, she'll still raise it and train it herself. Her instincts as a woman flare up, and she knows her position. She's a princess, and she can make anything happen. Ulysses, of course, is only messing with her. Kurt doesn't have a child, he's simply taking care of an egg they brought back from their last trip, and it's close to hatching. Knowing Kurt's habits, Ulysses starts to worry. What kind of creature could possibly emerge from an egg he's personally nurturing? Her worry proves justified when Kurt suddenly calls out for them, announcing that the egg has finally hatched. Meanwhile, in another place, Mimiko is overwhelmed by the stack of reports piled on her desk. She vents to Lady Ophelia, who teases that Mimiko looks like her mask is slipping. Discussing the paperwork, Ophelia casually mentions that Bishop Tristan has been found dead. She believes it was the doing of the Poland Church, trying to assign blame for the failed summoning ritual. She then asks Mimiko what her plans are for Marla Feiss, whether she intends to kill her. Though Mimiko might want to, she remembers that Kurt once told Marla Feiss he'd visit her in prison. If she acts against Marla now, it could enrage Kurt. Lucky for Marla Feiss, the bond she once took for granted is the only thing protecting her now. As for Kurt, Mimiko soon receives a letter that leaves her stunned. The egg Kurt had been caring for hatched into a girl. Now she wants to ask Ulysses about her future, since Ulysses was the one who made the offhand prophecy that Kurt was raising a child. That silly joke turned out to be true, and Mimiko is far too stunned to process it. She gathers everyone together, and a small child sits comfortably on Kurt's lap, gently touching his face and calling him Papa. Although the child just emerged from an egg, she appears to be around 3 years old. Yulisha reminds Kurt that it's unnatural for a human-looking child to come from an egg and labels her a monster. Despite that, Yulisha demands that Kurt hand over the child. When he questions her intentions, she plainly states that the child must be eliminated. Kurt refuses, unwilling to surrender the baby. He believes there's no way such a gentle child could bring harm. Even when Yulisha pulls the girl away from him, Kurt desperately pleads, offering to take full responsibility. She dismisses his offer. But then the child gazes up at Yulisha, touching her cheek and calling her Mama. Yulisha is stunned, momentarily picturing a peaceful life with Kurt, raising the child together. Before she can get lost in the fantasy, Lisa Lotta bluntly reminds her that the girl isn't her child with Kurt. Yulisha denies having such thoughts, but Lisa Lotta takes the girl from her. When the baby touches Lisa Lotta's cheek and also calls her Mama, she, too, is overwhelmed. She lets go of the child, and Sina scoops her up. The girl calls Sina sis. Just as Sina begins to enjoy the new title, Lisa Lotta returns, hoping to be called Mama again. Meanwhile, Khan speaks up, telling Yulisha that there's no reason to kill the child. He believes that with proper guidance, even someone born from darkness can change for the better. Left with no other option, Yulisha agrees. Lisa Lotta then suggests giving the baby a name. Since the child called her Mama, she proposes a name blending hers and Kurt's, Kururi. Yulisha protests, unwilling to admit the girl also called her Mama, and offers an alternative, Yakui. The disagreement quickly turns into a loud argument, eventually waking the baby. Curious, the child asks why they are fighting. She reaches out and holds their hands, calming everyone instantly. At that moment, they realize it no longer matters whose name is used. Seeing how much joy and unity the child brings, Kurt proposes a new name, Akari, symbolizing a place or area that connects them all. Everyone agrees, and the child beams with happiness at her new name. Even in a joyful moment, Yulisha remains cautious about the unfamiliar child. She secretly sends strands of hair and saliva to Mimiko for examination, wanting to be sure before making any decisions regarding the girl. The next morning, Kurt constructs a separate space in the house for the child. Akari is thrilled, but Yulisha doesn't see it as a room, more like a confinement area. There are no windows the child could use to escape, and layers of protective magic surround it, just in case the girl harbors malicious intent. As a further precaution, Yulisha makes sure Lisa Lotta and Akari don't come into contact with the girl until she receives Mimiko's results. With business matters to handle alongside Kurt, Yulisha summons him to head out. Akari wishes to accompany them but is told she must stay behind. She then asks Sina to watch over the baby until they come back. While traveling, Yulisha urges Kurt to move swiftly with their agenda so they can return to Akari quickly. Midway, she hears the sound of a baby and questions Kurt about it. When he confirms hearing it too, she checks the carriage. To her disbelief, Akari is inside, fully dressed. They wonder how she managed to sneak in. But since taking her along isn't an option and returning home would delay them too much, they look for an alternative. Fortunately, Yulisha notices a rider trailing them and asks the woman for help. While she's away, Kurt reflects on what troubles Yulisha. It isn't that she rejects the child out of dislike, she's simply worried about everyone's safety. He ponders whether he made the right call and what they'd do if the girl turns out to be dangerous. Yulisha returns, interrupting his thoughts. She's aware of what's on his mind, and she agrees with his concerns. Yet, since the future is unknown, neither of them can be faulted for how they feel. As they pause, an older man appears, reminding them of the urgency of their mission to save the city. Both Kurt and Akari answer with eager determination, while Yulisha silently watches their enthusiasm. While Yulisha remained absorbed in their excitement, the elderly man referred to Kurt as the wandering hero and Akari as his loyal attendant. He then urged them to save the world from the Demon King. With unwavering resolve, Kurt and Yulisha assured him they would give it their all. Just then, the old man's daughter-in-law arrived, mentioning that her father had been acting strangely lately, talking nonsense non-stop. She advised Kurt and Yulisha not to take his words too seriously. Regardless, she expressed her gratitude for their visit, revealing that she was the one who had requested their help. Before outlining the task, she remarked on how charming Kurt and Yulisha looked together as a married couple with their child, leaving both of them blushing. Before either Yulisha or Kurt could correct her, Akari made the situation more awkward by calling Kurt Papa and Yulisha Ali Mama, as if she had multiple mothers. Yulisha's face flashed bright red, and she was at a loss for words. Kurt, meanwhile, worried that Yulisha might be upset, and decided to show his dedication through hard work. He asked the lady about the assignment, and she explained that her pig farm was facing trouble, the pigs looked pale, hadn't been eating, and if the situation continued, they'd all perish. While Akari played the innocent child, attempting to feed the pigs some grass, Kurt inspected the farm and quickly identified the issue. He suspected the pigs were suffering from heat exhaustion and offered to prepare a special feed to help them recover. The woman agreed and left Kurt to work on the feed, saying she had to take her father-in-law out for a walk in the meantime. Before starting, Kurt searched for Ulisha and found her still where she had been, her cheeks as red as a rose. She couldn't stop imagining what life would be like married to Kurt. Kurt noticed her blush but assumed she was furious with him. Believing she was deeply offended, he resolved to make amends by focusing intently on preparing the feed, while Akari cheerfully darted around him. Afterward, he fed the pigs. Meanwhile, Ulisha snapped back to reality, scolding herself for indulging in such inappropriate daydreams. She tried to convince herself she wasn't attracted to the boy who seemed a bit clueless, reminding herself her role was purely professional, to protect him no matter what. Yet as she glanced his way, her heart began racing, leaving her uncertain about what these feelings meant. At that moment, a dragon soared overhead and descended right in front of Kurt and Akari. Ulisha panicked briefly, but the dragon meant no harm. It had come to eat the food Kurt had prepared. Kurt quickly reassured Ulisha, explaining that dragons showing up to feed alongside livestock was quite common in rural places like his home village. Ulisha fully understands this is far from ordinary, but she chooses not to argue with Kurt about it. It's Akari's first time witnessing such an awe-inspiring creature, and she eagerly asks both Kurt and Ulisha if she can pet the beast. Kurt quickly corrects her, explaining that this creature isn't a dog at all, it's actually a young dragon. Suddenly, Ulisha catches the sharp scent of blood in the air and goes to investigate. There, she finds a shadowy figure, one of Mimiko's phantom guards, tasked with watching over the unconscious Kurt. Just then, movement rustles in the nearby bushes. Without hesitation, Ulisha draws her sword. A few moments later, Kurt hears the distant clang of blades, but before he can see what's happening, Ulisha yells for him to grab Akari and flee. Kurt scoops Akari up, ready to escape, but before they can get away, the attacker steps forward, claws gleaming like wolverines, demanding they surrender the child. Kurt instantly misinterprets, assuming the child means the baby dragon, and asks if she's a dragon hunter. Ulisha, sensing something darker beneath the surface, insists they leave at once. The dragon, showing far more awareness than Kurt, quickly snatches both Kurt and Akari in its jaws and takes to the sky. Ulisha pauses for a moment to acknowledge Kurt's incredible skill. Taming a dragon known for its hostility toward humans is no small feat. She then turns her attention back to the attacker, blocking her strikes with her sword. Still, she can only hold out for so long against this relentless foe. When Timu's version of Miss Wolverine finally knocks Ulisha to the ground, she barely manages to rise again. Gritting her teeth, Ulisha demands to know which child the woman was after, the dragon or Akari. The assailant remains silent, clearly not expecting Ulisha to survive much longer. To prove her point, the woman disarms Ulisha and slashes her abdomen, forcing her to collapse to her knees. But Ulisha refuses to give up, fighting back with every ounce of strength she has left. As a last resort, she hurls Kurt's magic crystal at the attacker like a grenade. Meanwhile, the woman from earlier is walking with her father-in-law when they hear a loud commotion. Curious, she asks what it could be, but he dismissively tells her it's just the demon lord causing chaos again. She doesn't believe him, much like before. Ulisha thinks the fight is finally over, until the attacker rises from the dirt, revealing a set of horns. Clearly, she's a demon, perhaps the very demon king the old man warned them about. The demon confirms it, acknowledging that Ulisha's group already defeated one demon lord. This makes Ulisha realize the demon has been watching them since the city was attacked. With no weapons left and the enemy still standing, Ulisha surrenders for now, hoping Kurt and the dragon have at least made it safely back to their town. At the very moment she accepts that everything has come to an end, she feels a strange relief, knowing that, no matter what, she managed to protect Kurt. But then, a sound from beside her pulls her back to the present. That voice, that presence, it's none other than Kurt. She can hardly believe he has returned. Her mind races with questions. Did he come back riding the dragon? Has he gained the dragon's combat skills? But even if he meant to fight, she knows his fighting ability is lacking. Lacking? No, it's worse than that. His fighting skills are absolutely terrible. The thought of losing Kurt, the very person she swore to protect, is unbearable. And just as she feared, the dragon hurls Kurt against a nearby tree. Her suspicion was correct, riding the dragon hasn't improved his fighting in the slightest. He remains as unskilled and average as ever. What a disappointment. She rushes over to him, demanding to know why he returned. Why risk dying when he knows he's no match for their enemy? Kurt admits he acted impulsively but came back purely to escape with her. She barely has time to process this when yet another noise reaches her ears. What a chaotic day. Suddenly, a group of pigs rushes toward them, kicking up a cloud of dust that distracts the demon. Seizing the moment, they leap onto one of the pigs and make their escape. While riding, she asks about Ikori, and Kurt assures her Ikori is safe somewhere, waiting for their return. She also questions Kurt about his reckless decision, why choose death? He confesses it was a foolish move, but he couldn't abandon someone precious to him, letting her die while he fled. Her spirit feels a cold indifference. He just called her precious. Unlike Liselot, whose feelings are clearly misguided, she understands that Kurt means it as a friend. Still, a strange mixture of sadness and joy stirs within her. Why does her heart flutter at his words? Could this mean she has feelings for him? There's no time to dwell on it as suddenly, flames erupt across the pigs. The pigs vanish, and she falls with Kurt. The demon approaches, fire blazing in hand. Grabbing Kurt's blade, she prepares to fight, not because she believes she can win, but because Kurt came back for her, trusting her. She refuses to betray that trust. Her plan is to use the fire slicing technique to cut through the inferno, a delicate move she's never successfully executed before, but she must try. She swings, attempting to slice through the flames, but it fails. Surprisingly, she remains unharmed. Looking up, she notices Akari perched atop her head. The demon has withdrawn the fire. What could this mean? Was Akari the child the demon sought all along? These questions linger, unanswered in her mind. Before she can voice them, exhaustion overtakes her, and she collapses. The demon disappears. Kurt quickly tends to her wounds, and Akari gently touches her, assuring her she'll recover. Opening her eyes, she murmurs that she's fine. Yet countless questions swirl in her mind, starting with how Akari managed to leap onto her head in the first place. She asks them what exactly happened, and to her surprise, Kurt reveals that Akari never actually jumped. Instead, she was quite far away when the incident occurred, meaning she must have used teleportation magic. This revelation shocks everyone. Ulisha knows teleportation portals aren't common magic in their world. Those who have tried it still regard it as unstable and undeveloped. To make things even stranger, Akari teleported without using a teleportation stone. Ulisha asks if she can do it again, but Akari says no. Before she can press further, Pig calls their attention, and they notice many pigs are sick. Kurt and Akari rush to heal the pigs, while Ulisha returns them to the woman. The woman asks about her husband, and instead of revealing that he isn't actually her spouse, Ulisha simply says a villager helped him and that he went to thank this person or the dragon. As they fly, the dragon signals Kurt to follow him, and he does. Akari and Ulisha head off on their own. Ulisha's mind is restless, full of questions about Akari. She asks if Akari was the one who broke the magic spell, but Akari says no, meaning the demon must have withdrawn the fire herself. Why? Was it because of Akari? These questions linger in Ulisha's mind. She knows she needs to learn more about Akari, and luckily, Akari is still alive to be investigated. Suddenly, they see the dragon returning with Kurt, and with him is a visitor, the demon. There are many questions, and the demon starts to answer. When the dragon took Kurt away, he found the demon injured. Unsure what to do, Kurt decides to create an antidote to help her. The demon questions him, calling him foolish for trying to save his enemy. Kurt admits it might be stupid, but he doesn't see her as an enemy. If she hadn't stopped the spell, Akari and Ulisha would have died. Since kindness deserves kindness, he will help her. He prepares the antidote and gives it to the demon. She drinks it and feels stronger for a moment before collapsing again. Kurt confesses he added a sleeping agent to the antidote, so she will rest for 3 days. Though he wants to help, the demon caused harm to his people. Even if she hunts demons, she isn't meant to harm humans. This is her punishment. The demon is stunned, but Kurt bundles her into his cart. Seeing the demon leaves Ulisha feeling indifferent, she wonders if this is too risky, but she's unsure. Despite everything, Ulisha returns home. After many long days away, being back feels comforting, like a long-lost piece. At home, Sina and the others greet Akari with hugs, relieved she's safe. Lysalot also comes forward to embrace her. Ulisha knows she shouldn't let Lysalot and Akari get too close, but today is a joyful day, so she makes an exception. As she dwells on these thoughts, a stranger descends from the Atelier. To make matters even more complicated, Lysalot introduces a new figure as the Atelier Master. She imagines this man will be the face presented to the world in place of Kurt, but Ulisha is completely caught off guard. No one had told her beforehand. Poor Ulisha never seems to get a moment's peace with the kids she's responsible for. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for the next part. The new master is Rakuto, who expresses his gratitude to Kurt for building such a remarkable atelier. Rakuto encourages Kurt to continue his efforts and stay committed to the atelier's growth. Yet Ulisha begins to feel uneasy about Rakuto since Mimiko and Ophelia haven't mentioned anything about him. To get a clearer picture, she asks Kurt to step inside and busy himself with dinner preparations, while sending Sina off to watch over Akari. Then she turns her attention to Rakuto, who suddenly behaves with unexpected arrogance. It quickly dawns on Ulisha that this man isn't real, he's an illusion conjured by Lysa's sword, which Kurt himself had crafted. So, in a funny twist, Kurt ends up being tricked by his own magic. Nobody had asked for this, but there it is. Lysalot then explains to Ulisha what inspired her creation of this confident, alpha male figure. She had imagined what Kurt might look like 2 decades down the line. Just as they're joking around, the illusion abruptly vanishes, leaving behind a note from Mimiko. The message informs Ulisha that Mimiko will arrive in 3 days after finishing her investigation report on Akari. True to her word, Mimiko appears 3 days later and delivers her findings. She explains that after a detailed study, her team concluded that Akari's existence is unprecedented. She's a discovery unlike any other. Mimiko points out that while Akari shows human characteristics, certain parts of her body, such as her nails, contain a substance similar to the magical crystals used in spatial magic, a type of magic believed to be lost and unheard of in humans. Given this, Akari is considered something unique, though not necessarily dangerous. Still, Mimiko insists on caution and proposes placing a sealing curse on Akari to prevent her from using spatial magic like teleportation. She suggests bringing Akari to a research lab for further study. Kurt immediately objects, drawing a parallel between himself and Akari. If she can place her trust in him, why shouldn't she trust Akari? He highlights Akari's humility and kindness, recalling how she risked her life to aid a demon woman despite the danger. For Kurt, Akari deserves to be seen as a human friend, not as a threat simply because she wields unfamiliar powers. Kurt firmly refuses to let Mimiko take Akari away, and Ulysses and Lysalot stand with him, making it clear that the three of them consider themselves Akari's protectors, her family, in every sense. Mimiko realizes that handling Akari's situation is no longer her concern, so she decides to stop interfering and stands up with the intent to check on the demon woman locked away in the basement. Kurt pleads with her not to imprison the demon, but given that demons are sworn enemies of humans, what choice does she really have? Without hesitation, Mimiko heads downstairs, injects the demon with a syringe, and wakes her from unconsciousness. The demon remains silent, explaining that warriors don't speak unless absolutely necessary. From this, Mimiko deduces that the demon must be a warrior herself. She attempts to provoke the demon, and sure enough, the demon reacts and tries to attack, though without much force. However, the magic barrier within the cell neutralizes all her abilities. Realizing just how powerless she is in this prison, the demon listens as Mimiko questions her about any nearby allies. The demon refuses to answer, insisting she will only talk to the one who defeated her. Mimiko then calls in Kurt, who addresses the demon as Oni-san, or older sister, asking if she's feeling alright now. The demon responds by complaining that her restraints are painful, subtly hoping Kurt will loosen them. But Kurt refuses, apologizing and explaining that Mimiko and the others ordered her to keep the demon secured until the interrogation is finished. Cutting straight to the chase, the demon mentions that Kurt had brought up Hildegard's name earlier. For context, Hildegard, also called Hilda, is the demon girl Kurt shared his first kiss with in his youth. Curious, Ulysses asks Kurt who the demon is referring to, and he explains that Hilda is a girl who frequently visited his village with her father for trading. Kurt notes that both Hilda and the demon share similar horns, which is why he mentioned Hilda's name, thinking they might be connected. When Kurt confirms that the Hilda he knows is the same one the demon knows, she reveals her true purpose. She's here to rescue Hilda, who is being held captive by Margrave Tycoon. But this still doesn't explain why she tried to kill Kurt, Akari, the dragon, or others. Kurt urgently begs Ulysses to act quickly and save Hilda. However, Ulysses is skeptical and demands the demon explain why she targeted Akari. The demon clarifies that during her investigation of the Margrave, she discovered he was also investigating the Atelier. This led her to witness Akari suddenly appear in Kurt's carriage through lost teleportation magic. She desires Akari's power to teleport so she can reach Hilda and free her. Kurt, as usual, immediately trusts the demon without demanding proof, but Ulysses insists on evidence. In response, the demon reveals a pendant hidden beneath her clothing, a treasure bearing the griffin crest that Hilda once wore. Apparently, Hilda had given the demon this crest. Additionally, the demon only ceased her attack on Akari when she noticed Ulysses holding Kurt's dagger marked with the same crest, and Kurt confirms that the dagger was a gift from Hilda. Now that everything is clear, everyone, including Mimiko, agrees on the need to rescue Hilda. However, Mimiko still refuses to let the demon go freely, for obvious reasons. Kurt assures the demon that he will save Hilda, and trusting him, the demon reveals her name, Soul Flare. Suddenly, Akari shows up out of nowhere, prompting Kurt to scold her for interrupting their serious discussion. She apologizes, nearly in tears, explaining she only wanted to join them in some fun. After dealing with Akari, Kurt turns to Mimiko for assistance, since he lacks the necessary resources for the mission ahead. Their next step is to devise a solid plan, a plan so clever that it won't be detected by anyone. Without hesitation, Lysalot produces a map leading to Margrave Tycoon's residence. Curious, they ask how she knows so much, and she shares some background. The first Margrave to live there was Margrave Tanga. He and his wife, Farnard, passed away a decade ago after the birth of their daughter, Famil. Oddly, the daughter also died a few years back from a mysterious illness. Strange, right? Absolutely. Despite how grim the situation is with Margrave Tycoon, they must figure out a strategy. Tycoon's house isn't large, but there is one room no one is allowed to enter. Why could that be? Where else would Tycoon hide Hildegard except that locked chamber? Reports indicate he frequently brings food to this room. This suggests he's feeding someone, or something. But for what purpose? Soul Flare admits she is aware of that room. She once tried to get inside but failed due to Tycoon's strict security. The door is always locked, and Tycoon keeps the key at all times. This means they have to be extremely clever to get inside. Thankfully, the team is known for their sharp minds. Lisa Latte is the first to come up with a brilliant idea. Since Tycoon is always the one with the key, they need to find a way to make him unlock the door himself. But how? Lisa Latte explains, they can create the illusion of an intruder trying to break in. That would frighten Tycoon into opening the door, fearing someone is trying to free his prisoner. Once he opens it, they can slip inside. Sounds perfect, right? I'm eager to see how this plan plays out. Luckily, the city's festival is about to start, which gives them a good reason to visit the area. Since the Atelier master has to work at the festival, and Lisa Latte has already created an illusion of the master named Rakuto, she suggests using that illusion as part of their cover. The plan is solid, but they'll need Kurt with them. There's no way to leave him alone in the Atelier with a demon. Since Kurt's true identity as the master must remain secret, they need a plausible reason for him to come along. With the festival underway, Lisa Latte suggests that Kurt follow them so he can experience the city and learn about the local food culture. A clever ruse, indeed, one that leaves Kurt's two rivals wondering if this trip is a festival outing or a secret date. Lisa Latte and Yulisha decide to settle who gets to spend time with Kurt first by playing rock paper scissors. Lisa wins the first day, which instantly puts Yulisha in a bad mood. Eventually, they all set off and reach their lodge. Naturally, Akari tags along on the trip too. Rakuto excuses himself to rest, and Yulisha asks Kurt to stay with Lisa Latte and Akari while she goes off to check on Tycoon. As usual, Kurt feels sidelined since no one's giving him a task. He offers to join Yulisha on her investigation, but Lisa Latte quickly objects. This is her chance for a date, and she's not about to let Kurt ruin it. She paints a picture of how enjoyable the day will be at the festival, the show, all the fun moments. Kurt catches her enthusiasm and decides to stay with her. On their first day, Lisa takes him to the festival in the city. To make sure they don't get separated, Kurt carries Akari in his arms, asking her to hold on tight, like a little family out for a day. They pause to buy some fruit, and like any dad would, Kurt buys for Lisa and Akari but skips getting any for himself, sharing what he has with them. When he tastes a sip from Lisa's fruit, her eyes brighten up. The reason is clear, the person she cares about is drinking from the same spot she just did. After returning the fruit, Lisa quickly gulps down all the juice, which makes Kurt curious about why she's in such a hurry. Even after finishing the drink, she stashes the fruit in her bag. He thinks she should toss it, but who could throw away something so special? Lisa claims it's because she loves that fruit since it's native to her home. They continue exploring the festival, and she wonders if Kurt has attended many festivals during his adventures. He admits he's seen several, but mostly stayed on the sidelines doing team chores rather than enjoying the festivities. Hearing that makes Lisa feel a bit bad. Kurt says he wants to have a good time today, and make sure Akari enjoys herself too. Lisa makes it her personal mission to give him a memorable day, especially since she plans to confess her feelings by the end of it. They stroll through the market and compete in some events. Kurt wins at weightlifting, and Lisa claims victory in the aerial contest. Her plan is simple: make sure Kurt has an amazing day, appreciate her presence, and then confess her feelings, just not right there in the busy market. She leads him to a quiet park, where the day seems to have come to a gentle close. To her, this marks the end of their time together. He, however, had genuinely enjoyed being by her side. As the daylight fades, the world around him seems to brighten, and her words, the confession she's been holding on to, feel real and significant. She notices him standing still, eyes fixed on a building in the distance. Planning to approach him with her confession there, she moves closer, and then she sees the place he's staring at. It's Tikoni's building. Immediately, she understands what's weighing on his mind: Hildegard. Instead of letting jealousy or selfishness take over, she gently asks if he's worried about her. He admits he's not. He explains that everyone has promised to save Hildegard, and if he were worried, it would mean he doesn't trust them. Still, he can't shake the feeling of helplessness. Everyone else is taking action, but he feels stuck, unable to contribute. She tells him how he took the poison from her and managed to build the Atelier in just a day. To her, those are accomplishments worth recognizing. But he dismisses them, insisting anyone else could have done the same. They aren't remarkable. Healing someone? That's no small thing. She finds herself searching for words to uplift him, so she simply tells him she likes him, not romantically, but in the sense that everyone around him admires and cares for him. Every person in that Atelier is there because of him. They're motivated by their affection for him, not just out of obligation. That's why they're ready to go after Hildegard. To help him, because they want to. Her words sink in. He admits that he cares deeply for everyone there, and even when he feels useless, knowing he's valued by them gives him some comfort. Her heartfelt speech moves him to tears. Their tender moment is broken when Akari announces she's hungry. He reaches out to hold her, and she looks up at him. It would have been the perfect moment to confess, but she holds back. Still, seeing him smile is enough for now. So, what do you think will happen at the end of this mission?